13 habits to make your car last without repairs is what I'm getting into today. Because most people do not lose cars because the badge was bad, they lose them because the habits were bad. If you stay with me, I'm going to show you what actually keeps an engine, transmission, suspension, and electrical system alive for the long haul. What little mistakes quietly destroy good vehicles, and how to think like the owners who see 300, 400, even 500,000 miles on the odometer. This is the Car Habits Podcast. This episode is built for the drive to work, the toolbox in the garage, the warehouse shift, the late-night commute, or that quiet hour when you just want real automotive insight without the fluff. A lot of people think a 500,000-mile car has to be some magical unicorn, but that is not how it usually happens. Most of the time, it is a regular sedan, pickup, SUV, or van that got treated with discipline. I have seen fleet Crown Victorias, old Camrys, GM trucks, and even beat-up work vans go way farther than newer luxury vehicles because the owner respected maintenance strategy, listened for changes, and did not wait for small issues to become catastrophic failures. The first habit is simple. Follow a strict fluid service schedule, not your feelings. Engine oil, coolant, transmission fluid, brake fluid, differential fluid, and power steering fluid are the life support system of a car. Yeah. I remember a customer with an older Toyota Avalon who swore the car was indestructible. It had over 200,000 miles and still drove smooth, so he started stretching oil changes because nothing sounded wrong. Then one summer afternoon I was in his driveway, pulled the oil cap, and found heavy varnish and sludge starting to build. He got lucky because we caught it early. We cleaned up what we could, changed the oil more aggressively for a while, and the car kept going. But that moment right there is the difference between a reliable legend and an expensive engine job. Clean fluids buy time. Dirty fluids buy damage. The second habit is warming up intelligently, not excessively. I am not talking about letting a car idle for 20 minutes like it is 1985. I mean start it, give it a little time to stabilize, then drive gently until oil temperature and transmission behavior settle in. Cold starts are where a lot of wear happens. Metal has not fully expanded, lubrication has not fully circulated, and people mash the throttle, leaving the neighborhood like the engine already ran for an hour. That is a habit that quietly shortens long-term mechanical reliability. The third habit is paying attention to noises early. If your car starts humming, ticking, clunking, whining, or vibrating differently, that is your warning system talking. Too many drivers turn the radio up and keep moving. I had a driveway call on an older Honda Odyssey where the owner said the van only made a chirping sound once in a while, so she ignored it for months. The serpentine belt tensioner was failing, the belt was walking, and one day it finally snapped while she was picking up her kids. What? Suddenly the battery light came on, steering got heavy, the van overheated, and a cheap maintenance item became a tow bill, stress, and a ruined afternoon. Catching noises early is advanced automotive diagnostics for regular people. The fourth habit is replacing wear items before they become failure points. Hoses, belts, spark plugs, filters, brakes, batteries, tires, suspension bushings, and motor mounts do not usually fail without warning. They age out. Owners who reach huge mileage do not brag about squeezing every last mile out of a cracked belt or weak battery. They replace predictable wear items on purpose. I saw this all the time around dealerships. The customers with the lowest ownership cost analysis over 10 years were not always the richest people. They were the most proactive. They understood that planned maintenance is cheaper than reactive repair. Okay, so habit 5 is using quality parts and the right specifications. This does not always mean the most expensive dealer part, but it absolutely means not throwing the cheapest mystery part from the internet onto a critical system and hoping for the best. I have seen bargain ignition coils misfire out of the box, cheap sensors create false codes, and discount filters collapse internally. One used car I bought at auction had a rough idle that scared everyone away. The seller assumed engine damage. I checked it, found bargain plugs and wrong gap specs, replaced them with proper components, and the engine smoothed right out. Ha! That car taught me again that bad parts can make a good vehicle look sick. The sixth habit is keeping the cooling system perfect, because overheating is one of the fastest ways to turn a durable engine into scrap. People obsess over horsepower and forget temperature control. A weak radiator cap, old coolant, soft hose, sticking thermostat, or lazy fan can be the tiny failure that leads to head gasket damage, warped components, or long-term powertrain analysis nobody wants to pay for. I have seen engines survive abuse that should have killed them, but I have also seen very solid engines get wiped out by one overheated climb in summer traffic. There was a work truck owner who kept topping off coolant and saying it was no big deal because the gauge only moved a little. Hold on. That little movement was the warning. The radiator had a small leak, air got into the system, and one day the truck pushed past normal temperature on the highway. After that, combustion gases were getting into the cooling system, and the repair cost jumped from manageable to painful. Habit 7 is checking fluid levels and tire condition regularly with your own eyes, not assuming the car will tell you everything through a dashboard light. Modern vehicles are smart, but they are not magic. A low oil level, small coolant drop, or uneven tire wear can show up long before the computer decides to alert you. A 2-minute walk around once a week is one of the best maintenance habits in the whole automotive universe. Habit 8 is driving smoothly. This sounds boring, but it is huge for long-term vehicle reliability. Gentle throttle input, gradual braking, sane cornering, and avoiding potholes whenever possible reduce wear on the powertrain, brakes, tires, steering, and suspension. No, for real! Aggressive drivers love to blame brands, but sometimes the problem is not the manufacturer. It is the daily abuse. Quick launches hammer engine mounts, hard stops cook brakes, curb hits bend suspension components, and constant high-load operation overheats automatic transmissions. One sedan I inspected for trade-in had only 90,000 miles, but it drove like a tired taxi because every control arm bushing was worn, the wheels were bent, and the transmission fluid smelled burned. Mileage alone does not age a car. Driving style does. Habit 9 is fixing leaks immediately. Oil leaks, coolant leaks, vacuum leaks, transmission seepage, brake fluid leaks, and even water leaks into the cabin all matter. People see a few drops on the driveway and say they will get to it later. Really? Later is how alternators get soaked in oil, rubber bushings get ruined, low fluid conditions develop, and corrosion starts under carpets and connectors. I once bought an older BMW cheaply because the owner was tired of a valve cover leak smell. Underneath that simple complaint was oil on the exhaust, weak ignition components, and brittle plastic nearby from repeated heat cycles. Fixing the leak early would have saved money and frustration. Letting it ride made the car feel worse than it really was. Habit 10 is keeping the car clean underneath and inside the engine bay, especially if you live where roads get salted or dirt roads are common. Corrosion is mechanical betrayal in slow motion. It attacks brake lines, fuel lines, subframes, suspension bolts, ground connections, and cooling fittings. Wow! I have been under vehicles where the engine still sounded healthy, but the structure and hardware were so rusty that any repair turned into a battle. The owners were shocked because they thought reliability was only about the engine and transmission. It is not. Vehicle safety considerations matter too. A 500,000-mile car still has to be safe enough to keep. Rinsing the underbody, cleaning packed mud, and keeping drain channels open are not glamorous habits, but they protect the whole machine. Habit 11 is not ignoring warning lights and drivability changes just because the car still moves. If the check engine light is flashing, if the transmission starts shifting oddly, if the steering changes feel, or if fuel economy suddenly drops, you are being given useful data. I had a customer with a Chevrolet Tahoe who said it ran a little rough only in the morning, and he did not want to spend diagnostic money because it went away after breakfast. Sure, that little morning misfire turned out to be a coolant seep into one cylinder from an intake-related issue. Early repair would have been much cheaper. Waiting let contamination build, misfires worsen, and converter risk increase. Paying for diagnosis early is often one of the smartest ownership cost decisions a driver can make. Habit 12 is using the vehicle for what it was built to do. This also happens with some SUVs, where owners buy based on image, then work the vehicle outside its design envelope every weekend. A small crossover is not a heavy-duty tow rig. A compact sedan is not meant to slam potholes loaded with construction tools every day. Jeez. Long life comes from matching the job to the machine. I saw a repossessed half-ton truck once that had spent years towing way above comfort level. The rear suspension sagged, the transmission shifted hot and lazy, and the differential fluid looked like metallic paint. The owner kept saying trucks are made to tow anything. Nah, not like that. Respect payload, towing limits, cooling capacity, and brake design if you want genuine durability instead of marketing fantasy. Habit 13 is documenting everything. Keep records of oil changes, parts replaced, fluid services, tire rotations, alignments, and inspections. This is not just for resale. It helps you spot patterns. If a battery keeps dying, if a tire keeps wearing oddly, or if a certain code returns every winter, the paperwork tells the story before the breakdown does. I learned this hard at auctions, because the cleanest cars on paper were not always the prettiest. Some looked rough outside, but had folders full of receipts, clear maintenance timing, and proof of careful ownership. Those were usually better bets than shiny cars with no history and a fresh wash. Documentation is part of technical automotive knowledge because memory lies and records do not. There is another habit that sits underneath all 13, and that is emotional discipline. People kill cars by being impatient, cheap in the wrong places, or stubborn when evidence is right in front of them. I have seen owners deny obvious transmission issues because they did not want to hear bad news. I have seen buyers stretch loans on used luxury vehicles, skip maintenance because the payment already hurt, then act surprised when neglected air suspension, turbo plumbing, and electrical issues arrived all at once. Yikes! A long-lasting car usually belongs to someone who can separate ego from reality. Let me tell you about an old Lexus sedan that taught this lesson perfectly. The owner was not flashy. He kept a notebook in the glove box, changed fluids early, repaired small seepage before it spread, and never treated the car like it owed him anything. When a wheel bearing started humming, he handled it. When the battery tested weak, he replaced it before winter. When the radiator got old, he did not wait for a crack. By the time that car rolled past 400,000 miles, it did not happen because Lexus built a miracle. It happened because the owner had miracle-level consistency. That is what people miss when they chase the perfect brand. Now let me tell you about the opposite. I inspected a German luxury SUV for a buyer who was excited because the price looked like a steal. On the surface, it was clean, low miles, nice interior, big screen, premium feel, all of that. But underneath, the tires were mismatched. There was dried coolant residue near a plastic cooling fitting. The service history had gaps, and the transmission adaptation felt off on the road test. I told him this was the kind of deal that feels cheap until ownership starts. He bought it anyway because he was in love with the badge. 6 months later, he called me, frustrated, because the cooling issue got worse, the suspension fault showed up, and the repair estimate looked like a second down payment. Ugh. The vehicle was not evil. The habit of buying with emotion was the real problem. This same principle applies after you own the car. The people who hit huge mileage pay attention to trends. Is startup getting noisier than last month? Is the transmission taking slightly longer to engage in reverse? Is fuel mileage dropping without a seasonal reason? Is one tire losing air more often than the rest? Those details matter because cars almost always whisper before they scream. Okay, so long-term performance is not protected by luck. It is protected by observation. Another story comes from a driveway repair on an older Ford F-150 used by a self-employed contractor. He depended on that truck every day and could not afford downtime. The smart thing he did was schedule maintenance around his work calendar instead of gambling on breakdowns. We handled brakes before they got metal to metal, replaced a weak starter before it stranded him at a job site, and changed transmission fluid while it was still healthy, instead of after damage showed up. Thank God. That truck crossed 300,000 miles because he treated reliability like business strategy, not wishful thinking. Next, a quick story about a sedan with the same issue from a different angle. A young driver financed a used Nissan on a tight budget. Good kid, honest, trying to get to work, but he made the classic mistake of assuming the monthly payment was the cost of the car. When tires got thin, he delayed. When the CVT started acting strange, he ignored it. When the fluid was due, nobody had explained why it mattered. By the time he asked for help, the vehicle had turned a manageable maintenance path into a high-risk repair situation. I mean, that happens every day in both subprime and prime lending worlds. People get approved, but nobody teaches ownership discipline. If you really want 500,000 miles without major repairs, you also need to choose a vehicle platform that has a proven service culture around it. Some engines are easier to maintain, some transmissions handle neglect better than others, and some vehicles have better parts support, independent shop familiarity, and more forgiving design. That does not mean every famous reliable model is perfect. Seriously? Of course not. It means the odds improve when you buy something with a strong track record and realistic repair access. This is why used versus new matters in an interesting way. A brand new vehicle gives you fresh components, warranty backup, and modern safety, but sometimes more complexity. An older proven model may have lower purchase cost and easier serviceability, but only if you buy the right example. The wrong used car can age you fast. The right used car, maintained well, can outlive trends, financing mistakes, and all the noise people repeat online. What I want you to understand is that 500,000 miles is rarely one giant heroic act. It is 1,000 boring, smart decisions stacked together until the odometer tells a story. Change the fluids, watch temperatures, listen for new sounds, use quality parts, fix leaks early, clean the underside, drive like you plan to keep it, inspect before buying, document everything, respect warm-ups, payload, towing limits, and warning lights. That is the formula. It is not glamorous, but it works. I also want to be realistic with you. Some repairs will still happen. Wheel bearings wear out, alternators fail, starters get tired, batteries die, sensors age. That does not mean the vehicle failed as a platform. It means machines are machines. The phrase "without repairs" really means without the big, preventable, catastrophic stuff that sends a car to the junkyard before it's time. There is a difference between normal wear and mechanical neglect. People mix those up all the time. One dealership story always sticks with me. A customer traded in a very average pickup with very high miles, and the sales staff laughed at the odometer before appraising it. But when the shop looked closer, the truck had even compression, smooth shifts, clean fluid history, original manuals, and recent preventive work. Meanwhile, a much newer, flashy trade-in had hidden overheating history and sloppy repairs. What do you mean? I mean, the older truck had been loved correctly, and the newer one had been neglected in style. Mileage alone is not a verdict. Maintenance behavior is the verdict. There was also a mobile mechanic call that sums this up perfectly. An elderly customer owned an old Buick that everybody in the family wanted her to replace. They kept saying the car was too old. But every time I checked it, the basics were right. Good oil service, solid cooling system care, decent tires, clean battery terminals, and immediate attention to little issues. Finally, the car kept starting, kept running, and kept costing less per year than many newer vehicles with payments. That is long-term ownership cost analysis in the real world, not just on paper. If you are shopping right now, this lesson helps before you even buy. Look for owners with receipts, matching tires, stable idle, clean fluid condition, no overheating smell, no strange shift behavior, and no story that sounds too polished. Be careful with fresh detail jobs hiding leaks. Be careful with sellers who say a warning light is probably nothing. Be careful with vehicles that feel neglected in little ways, because little ways usually point to big patterns. Wait. And if financing is part of the deal, leave room in your budget for maintenance. A car note without a repair reserve is how good vehicles become bad experiences. If you already own your vehicle, start where you are. You do not need to become obsessive overnight. Build simple habits. Check fluids on a schedule. Read the service manual. Use trusted parts. Find a good independent shop or technician. Handle weird noises early. Wash the salt off. Scan codes when lights appear. Learn how your vehicle normally sounds and feels so you can catch changes fast. That is premium automotive education that saves ordinary people real money. And let me say one more thing for the people who think reliability is boring. There is something deeply satisfying about owning a machine for a very long time and understanding it better than the average person. You know how it idles on cold mornings. You know how it sounds climbing a grade. You know which maintenance interval matters and which salesman pitch does not. No way. That kind of experience turns a regular owner into a smart owner, and smart owners usually spend less, panic less, and get stranded less. So when somebody asks how to make a car last over 500,000 miles without repairs, my answer is not one secret product, one miracle engine, or one magic brand. My answer is habits. Consistent, realistic, disciplined habits backed by observation, service records, proper diagnostics, and respect for how machines actually wear. That is true whether you drive a simple commuter, an old truck, a family SUV, or a work van. If you treat the car like a disposable appliance, it will repay you with short life. If you treat it like an asset, it will often surprise you. That's huge! And that surprise usually looks a lot like another year without a payment, another year without drama, and another year of reliable miles. Don't forget to check the description for this week's top Amazon Auto Deals link.